It was just another typical day at the airport, but Donovan Banks knew better than to let his guard down. A black man in his mid-40s. With a tailored gray suit that screamed success, Donovan didn't look out of place among the well-dressed travelers. But he was used to being underestimated, especially when it came to people like Rachel, the flight attendant he was about to meet. Donovan walked up to the gate with a first-class ticket in hand, ready to board his flight. The airport was buzzing with activity, but he remained calm and composed. He glanced at his phone, checking emails, when Rachel caught his attention. She looked up as he approached, barely glancing at him before she asked for his ticket. He handed it over without a word. A quick, almost dismissive glance from Rachel confirmed that he wasn't getting the usual polite treatment. She looked back at the ticket, frowning slightly before returning her gaze to him. "Sir, you're supposed to be in economy," Rachel said, her tone cold and dismissive, not bothering to give him a second glance. Donovan blinked. "No, that's my seat. 1A, first class. I've had it confirmed for weeks." She looked at the ticket again, but this time her eyes lingered on it longer than necessary. A flicker of uncertainty passed over her face, but she quickly covered it with forced professionalism. "No," she insisted. "You're in the wrong seat. Please step aside. I'll get this sorted out for you." There was a brief moment of silence before the passengers in the queue behind them began murmuring, sensing the tension. Donovan, still composed, took a step back, but the sting of her words settled deep in his chest. Something about the way she dismissed him, without checking the facts or offering the slightest apology, rubbed him the wrong way. "Ma'am, I don't think you understand," Donovan said quietly, his voice calm but firm. "I'm not moving. I'm in 1A, and I'm not leaving my seat." Rachel didn't flinch. Instead, she motioned to the back of the plane. "I'm going to have to move you to economy. I'll need to involve the captain if necessary." The word stung. She was treating him like an inconvenience, like someone who didn't belong in the seat he'd paid for, like someone who was out of place. Without another word, she turned and began walking away, expecting him to follow her. The murmur among the other passengers grew. A few watched curiously as Donovan, still with his cool demeanor, followed her down the aisle toward economy. He sat down, his first-class ticket now rendered meaningless, and tried to shake off the frustration that simmered beneath the surface. It wasn't just the seat. It was the treatment, the assumption, the way she dismissed him so easily, just because of the way he looked. The plane took off, and the tension in the cabin didn't dissipate. Donovan had done nothing wrong, but there he was, sitting in economy, while others walked past him to take their seats in first class. He felt the weight of the eyes on him. He could tell they were curious, confused, maybe even judgmental. But Donovan wasn't the type to let such things bother him. Instead, he pulled out his tablet and started working on some business files, blocking out everything else around him. About halfway through the flight, turbulence shook the plane and the seatbelt sign came on. The plane settled, but a few minutes later, the cockpit door opened and the co-pilot emerged. Donovan looked up briefly, barely noticing him as the co-pilot walked down the aisle with purpose, stopping at Donovan's row. "Mr. Banks," the co-pilot said, his voice soft but firm. "The captain would like to speak with you." Donovan's heart skipped a beat. He didn't need to look at the other passengers to know they were all watching him. He stood slowly, adjusting his jacket, trying to keep his expression neutral as he followed the co-pilot to the front of the plane. As they reached the cockpit, Donovan saw the captain standing there, waiting for him. "Mr. Banks," the captain began, offering a polite but apologetic smile. "I'm afraid there's been a misunderstanding. I didn't realize you were on board with us today." "Clearly," Donovan said quietly, his tone not as calm as it had been moments before. The captain hesitated, then motioned for Donovan to step inside the cockpit. As Donovan entered, he took a breath, steadying himself. He had been patient, but it was clear this was no longer a simple mistake. Rachel's assumption, her treatment of him, it was all part of something bigger, and he wasn't going to let it slide. "I think you might want to check with corporate," Donovan said, his voice low but commanding. "You see, Captain, I'm not just any passenger. I own this plane." The captain froze. His eyes widened in disbelief, but he quickly masked it with professional smile. "Mr. Banks, I'm sorry. I wasn't aware, the captain started. No, you weren't, Donovan interjected, pulling out his phone and opening an email. He handed it over to the captain, who took it with shaky hands. As he read the email, his face drained of color. This is... The captain began, but his voice trailed off. It's all right, Captain. I understand. But I think it's time we had a conversation about how your staff handles customers like me. Donovan's voice was steady, but his eyes were firm. The captain nodded quickly, his face red with embarrassment. He turned to Rachel, who was standing nearby, her face pale as she realized what had just happened. Rachel opened her mouth, but no words came out. She was caught, exposed in front of everyone. Donovan hadn't even raised his voice, and yet she knew exactly what was coming next. Rachel, Donovan said calmly, addressing her now, I think it's time you understood who you're dealing with. She didn't respond. She couldn't. Later, Donovan sat back in first class, the seat he'd paid for, while Rachel was forced to move to the back of the plane. The passengers around him whispered among themselves, some offering him awkward glances, others trying to make sense of the situation. But Donovan wasn't concerned with them. He had dealt with Rachel's ignorance, and he had handled it quietly. No need to stir up drama. The lesson had been taught, and it wasn't over yet. As the plane descended toward their destination, Donovan's phone buzzed. He looked down, his expression unreadable. It was a message from his assistant. Mr. Banks, there's an issue that requires your immediate attention when we land. I'll have the details ready for you. Donovan smirked to himself. He'd known this wouldn't be the last of it. This wasn't just about a flight. This was about something bigger. He glanced toward the back of the plane. Rachel wasn't going to forget this day anytime soon. But Donovan? He hadn't even started. The plane touched down, and the familiar hum of the wheels meeting the runway broke Donovan Banks' brief moment of reflection. The chaotic bustle of passengers gathering their bags and preparing to board was deafening, but Donovan remained seated, calm and composed, as always. His mind, however, wasn't on the arrival. It was on the next step. He knew what was coming, and he was ready for it. As passengers filed out of the plane, Donovan made his way through the terminal. The familiar sense of control returned with every step. He wasn't just some businessman trying to get to his next meeting. Donovan on the very airline they'd just flown on. His phone buzzed again. It was his assistant, Marcus. Marcus, text message. Mr. Banks, the HR team is waiting for you in the conference room. The situation with the flight attendant is being handled as we speak. We need your input. Donovan paused mid-step. He knew exactly what situation Marcus meant, but he wasn't interested in simply reprimanding Rachel. That wouldn't solve anything. He needed to show the entire company that respect didn't come with a price tag. It came with accountability. He turned toward the conference room. The door opened as he stepped in, and the room fell silent. The HR team, along with the head of corporate operations, all stood waiting for him. HR director, cautiously. Mr. Banks, Donovan, cutting him off, calmly. First, I'd like to know who decided Rachel should be the one to interact with me. Was it random, or do you have a specific protocol for handling VIP passengers? The HR director shifted uncomfortably, glancing at the others in the room. HR director. Sir, it was not intentional. There was an issue with seat allocation, and it escalated. We understand this was a misunderstanding. Donovan coolly. A misunderstanding? You think this is just about a seat? He let the words hang in the air for a moment, his eyes narrowing slightly as he took his seat at the head of the table. Donovan, voice firm. It's about something much bigger than that. Rachel's behavior wasn't a mistake. It was an assumption that I don't belong where I am, just because of the way I look. And let's be clear, this wasn't about a seat. This was about who gets to decide who sits where. HR director, nervously. We'll handle the matter internally. She's been given a formal warning, and we've offered her further training. Donovan leaning forward. Training? No, she's not the issue. The issue is a culture where people like Rachel feel entitled to judge others, to push people aside, to decide who belongs and who doesn't. If you want to solve this, you need to start at the root. Do you want your employees to feel like they have the authority to decide who flies first class based on her own biases? Or do you want them to act with professionalism? The room was silent. The HR director nodded, but Donovan could see the reluctance in his eyes. This wasn't just about Rachel. This was about a system that had allowed Rachel's behavior to go unchecked. Donovan wasn't just going to fix one person's mistake. He was going to fix an entire culture. Donovan left the meeting feeling resolute, but something gnawed at him. He checked his watch. The day wasn't over yet. There was still work to do, and his business empire wasn't the only thing on his mind. He was approached by a familiar face. It was Marissa, the company's legal counsel, who had been in the meeting earlier. Marissa, with a concerned look, "Donovan, we need to talk. About Rachel and the fallout from the incident. I've been hearing things that might require your direct involvement." Donovan frowned. Donovan, irritated but calm. "Direct involvement? What do you mean? I already made it clear where I stand." Marissa, looking around cautiously. "It's not just Rachel. Some of the higher-ups in the company are not happy with how you handled things. They think you're overstepping, that you're too public about this. They want it to blow over." Donovan's expression hardened. He wasn't in the business of making people comfortable, and he wasn't about to let the people who ran Skyward Airlines hide from the truth. "Donovan, if they don't like it, then maybe they should find a new job. I'm not here to please anyone. This is about change. Real change." Marissa, looking concerned. "But Donovan, there are people who might push back harder than you think. Not everyone's as open to change as you are. I've already heard rumors that someone from corporate plans to take action." Donovan, raising an eyebrow. "Take action? What kind of action are we talking about?" Marissa, hesitant. "They might force your hand. They're not happy with the direction you're pushing for." Donovan's eyes narrowed. It was clear that his decision to confront the culture within Skyward Airlines wasn't going to be met with open arms. But that wasn't going to stop him. Donovan, coldly, "I'll handle it. Make sure the board knows I'm not going anywhere." Cut to Donovan in his hotel room. Donovan sat at the desk, flipping through paperwork, his mind racing. He had expected resistance, but this was bigger than he had anticipated. The moment he had made the decision to take control of the airline, he knew it would ruffle feathers. But what was coming next? He checked his phone again. Another text from Marcus. Marcus, text message. "Donovan, the board is meeting tomorrow. They're discussing the future of the airline. We've got a situation brewing. It's bigger than Rachel. You need to be there." Donovan sighed, then stood up and walked to the window. The lights of the city spread out before him. Endless. He had built his empire with his own hands, never backing down. But now, with this new challenge looming, Donovan Banks was facing his biggest test yet. Narrator, Donovan was about to find out just how deep the roots of corruption ran at Skyward Airlines. And what he didn't know yet, someone was waiting in the wings, someone with the power to take everything he had built and turn it upside down. As Donovan reached for his coat to head to the board meeting, his phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. "Unknown," text message. "You think you're in control, Donovan? You haven't seen anything yet. Tomorrow will be your last day at Skyward." Donovan stared at the screen. His heart skipped a beat. Who was this? And what were they planning? The room felt suddenly colder. Is this the end of Donovan's fight for change, or just the beginning of something much darker? The stage is set. Donovan Banks has faced a challenge, but the real battle is only just beginning. With enemies in the wings and a battle for power brewing, will Donovan hold on to his empire, or will someone with the strength to bring it all down stand in his way? Stay tuned for the next chapter. The stakes are higher than ever, and the twist will leave you on the edge of your seat.